They used to call her a monster. Every day, the scarred waitress at Mel's diner kept her arms hidden beneath long sleeves, quietly enduring the sneers and whispers of customers who never saw past the damaged skin. For 3 years, Sarah Miller served coffee in silence, swallowing the contempt of people who tossed coins at her feet like she wasn't worth eye contact. But that morning, everything changed. When a construction worker's rough shove sent her stumbling, the fabric slipped just enough to uncover a tattoo in military ink, unmistakable. And in a booth tucked in the back, a quiet man froze, recognition lighting his eyes like a flash bang. Everything the crowd thought they knew was about to be rewritten. Michael Kelly sat hunched in that corner booth, the same one he'd claimed 2 hours earlier when the coffee was fresh and the diner barely awake. His weathered hands cradled a third cup that had long gone cold, while memories he'd spent nearly 2 decades suppressing fought to surface. In the pocket of his worn jacket, a photograph burned like an umbrella, an old picture of himself in Desert Camo, arms draped around brothers in arms from the 3rd Infantry. Their faces beamed with the delusion of immortality, taken before that fateful July night in 2006 scorched it all away. He watched the waitress weave through tables with uncanny precision of fluid, alert, every move calculated. Her posture was unmistakable to a trained eye, military. She kept her left side angled away from view, sleeves always pulled down despite the sweltering heat that had other customers fanning themselves with menus. She scanned the room every few minutes, instinctively checking exits and threats. Michael saw the signs, the discipline, the awareness. It wasn't just routine, it was survival. And something about the way she moved, something buried deep in muscle memory, made him linger longer than he'd intended. It has to be her, he murmured again, barely audible over the clatter of the ancient air conditioner and the kitchen's steady hiss. After 18 years of chasing shadows of VA hospitals, veteran reunions, obscure forums, it has to be her. Here, in this forgotten little diner. But doubt still gnawed at him. The last time he'd seen her face, it was bloodied and backlit by fire. Her voice had been the final thing he heard before everything went black inside that burning Humvee. The memories came back in jagged flashes, the thunder of the eye, the eruption of flame, the door jammed tight, then her face cutting through the smoke, fearless and steady. He remembered her hands aburn but unwavering as they pulled him through a window far too small. He remembered her going back for Thompson, even as ammo began cooking off in the heat. And above all, he remembered when the second blast hit and she threw herself over him, shielding him without hesitation. The door flung open, snapping Michael out of the memory. Chad Morrison and his construction crew stormed in, shattering the morning calm like a brick through glass. Their arrival shifted the air, replacing quiet with tension. Chad, a walking wall of gym-fed bravado wrapped in a tight Branson construction tee, scanned the diner like a predator sniffing out prey. His brand of dominance had peaked back in high school, and he'd spent every year since trying to relive it. His gaze landed on Sarah as she approached, notepad in hand, and his face twisted into a familiar smirk, a one his crew knew too well. It always came before the verbal poison. Behind him, 2 lackeys followed like vultures, already chuckling in anticipation of the morning's entertainment, degrading someone else to feel taller themselves. Well, boys, Chad said loudly, voice slick with faux charm. Looks like we got a mystery on our hands. Half the diner could hear him now. The performance had begun. Hey, waitress, he said, loud and mocking, why you dressed for winter? It's hot as hell in here and you're wrapped up like you're headed to Alaska. What are you hiding? Burn scars? Needle tracks? His crew laughed on cue, sharp and grating. The rest of the customers averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by coffee cups and morning papers, the kind of silence that let cruelty thrive. Sarah moved toward the table with calm, even steps. Her expression was unreadable, perfected over years of swallowing pride and enduring abuse. But Michael noticed the faint stiffness in her shoulders, the subtle way she kept her left hand hidden behind her pad. The sunlight cut through the dirty windows, painting the room in lines of golden shadow. It divided the space between everyday routine and the darker corners where old ghosts waited. Sarah's voice was level when she spoke, showing no trace of offense. Good morning, gentlemen. Can I start you off with something to drink? Her neutrality only fueled Chad's need for a reaction. His smirk faltered as frustration simmered beneath the surface. He wanted to provoke Arsenia, but she gave him nothing. From the back, Michael's fists clenched involuntarily. He recognized the storm building, the one Chad didn't yet see. The waitress wasn't backing down, she was bracing, and Michael knew exactly what kind of fire was buried under those scars. These scars weren't just physical, they were remnants of another life, another battlefield. Michael's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of his seat, barely containing the impulse to intervene. There was something in the way the waitress stood her ground, enduring the barrage of insults without flinching, that spoke to a kind of strength few could understand, a strength forged not in comfort, but in chaos. The weight of the photo in his jacket pocket seemed heavier than before, as if demanding to be acknowledged. He studied her profile intently, the shape of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, the way she absent-mindedly tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear using her right hand, all while keeping the left hidden behind her notepad. Every gesture was deliberate, an unconscious choreography meant to shield a truth. His thoughts raced, overlaying memory upon reality. Could this composed woman quietly refilling coffee cups be the same soldier who'd once pulled him from the flames? He tried to bridge the gap between past and present, between blood and calm, between battlefield and diner. Across the room, Chad leaned back in his seat and made a show of eyeing Sarah with exaggerated disgust. The display might have been laughable if it weren't so laced with genuine cruelty. "So, are you gonna tell us why you're bundled up like it's snowing in July?" he asked, voice cutting. "Trying to cover up burns from a kitchen fire? Or maybe you're one of those cutters so can't deal with life without leaving your mark." The words hung heavy in the air, poisonous and charged. Even Chad's buddies shifted uncomfortably, their forced laughter faltering. Something in his tone crossed a line they hadn't expected him to breach. A couple sitting nearby exchanged anxious looks. The man's jaw clenched as he reached for his cane, but his wife's gentle hand stopped him. "Don't cause a scene, Harold. It's not our business," she whispered, though her eyes reflected the shame of inaction. The atmosphere had grown thick with unspoken tension, a pressure building like the humid calm before a summer storm. Every person in that diner felt the magnetic pull of a moment tipping toward confrontation, but none seemed brave enough to break the silence. Even the cook had gone quiet, watching through the pass window, spatula gripped tightly in one hand. Everyone felt the rising pressure, no one moved. Moments like these revealed who people truly were when the choice between safety and courage became impossible to ignore. And most, as usual, failed the test. But Michael didn't just see the scene, he felt it. Why was he so drawn to this woman? What did he know about her that made his grip on his coffee cup so tight? Why did he keep reaching for that photograph, as if touching it might help him believe what his eyes were showing him? The answer would soon shake every assumption in that small diner. It would redefine the woman they all thought they knew, the quiet server with haunted eyes and trembling hands. Chad, oblivious to the shift around him, continued feeding off the silence like a leech. "You wanna know what I think happened?" he said, his voice loud and condescending. "I bet she blew up her own meth lab." Sounds about right for a dump like these, a bunch of junkies cooking up chemicals in some trailer and ill. Boom. He mimed an explosion with his hands, and Sarah instinctively stepped back. It was subtle, but Michael caught it. That one movement betrayed what she worked so hard to keep hidden. "Or maybe," Chad continued, grinning, "she passed out drunk with a lit cigarette, burned the whole house down. Now she's stuck here serving eggs cause no one else wants to hire Freddy Krueger's little sister." The reference drew a nervous chuckle from one of Chad's crew, but the other man was clearly uncomfortable now. His eyes darted nervously toward the other tables. Sarah's composure, though solid, was cracking at the edges. Micro-expressions betrayed the storm within her, the subtle narrowing of her eyes, the shift in her breathing, the slight tremble of her left hand as she clutched the notepad. For a moment, the diner disappeared. She was somewhere else, Agana in the sand, in the heat, with the weight of gear on her back and the cries of the wounded around her. She could taste the dust and smoke, but she had trained herself to silence those memories, to lock them away in a place labeled "Not Now." And Mel's diner, for all its petty humiliations, demanded a different kind of bravery. the courage to endure ignorance with dignity, the strength to serve coffee to people who judged her scars without ever asking where they came from. Chad pulled out 2 crumpled dollar bills and dropped them to the floor at her feet, as if the act was a punchline. "Here's your tip, sweetheart. Maybe buy yourself some scar cream, though I doubt they make anything strong enough to fix that mess." The bills floated to the sticky linoleum like autumn leaves falling without purpose. The entire room froze. At table 3, Harold pushed himself halfway to his feet, fury etched into every line of his face. But again, his wife tugged his sleeve. "Harold, don't." Even the cook had stepped out from the kitchen, blocking the entrance to the back. His massive frame filled the doorway, fists clenched, unsure whether to protect or stay silent. He hesitated. Sarah bent down slowly to retrieve the bills, her movements precise and mechanical. There was no rush, no reaction. She straightened with quiet grace. But at that moment, whether by design or careless aggression, the Chad reached out. His hand shoved her shoulder roughly, sending her off balance. In that instant, the illusion shattered. Her shirt pulled loose from her waistband, and her sleeve slipped up past her elbow. The scars were plain to see, but there was something else, something that made Michael Kelly's heart stop. The tattoo. The tattoo stood in stark contrast to the web of scars around Ida. Clean, precise, and unmistakably genuine. 3rd Infantry Division. Ramadi, 2006. Cross trifles beneath the unit's insignia etched into skin marred by fire and violence. But these weren't the marks of an accident. They were the physical record of a sacrifice few could understand. A testament written not in metals, but in flesh. Now, the entire diner saw eye to this fragment of a hidden life suddenly exposed under flickering fluorescent light. It hit like a wave. The whisper came from a college student at the counter, barely more than a breath but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Holy! That's a military tattoo." And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. It was as if the pressure dropped, the air charged with something weightier than heat. A few patrons looked confused, still trying to process what they were seeing. But others, those who knew, who recognized it, had already begun to understand. Chad, however, remained utterly unaware, drunk on his own self-importance. He hadn't noticed the change in the room. He hadn't seen Michael rise slowly from his booth, or how the diner's expressions had turned from discomfort to quiet reverence. Instead, he pointed at Sarah's exposed arm and laughed a sharp, grating sound that bounced off the walls like a shattered bottle. "Oh, this is priceless," he sneered. "Look at this. She's playing soldier now. Did you get that off the internet? Trying to score sympathy by pretending to be military?" His voice cut like broken glass. "I've seen this before, these wannabes with their fake tats and surplus gear. A stolen valor, they call it. You think anyone's buying that someone like you served? Please, you probably can't even spell Afghanistan." Sarah stood completely still, her shirt still disheveled, the scars, the ink, exposed for all to see. Her face had lost all color, and the unshakable composure she'd worn since the start now gave way to something far deeper. Not anger, not pain, but a profound grief, a one that came from having your most guarded truth dragged into the light and mocked. She reached to pull her sleeve back down, hesitated halfway, and then stopped altogether. There was no point. The moment had already passed. Everyone had seen. The silence was total now. Even the coffee machine had fallen quiet, as if the place itself understood the weight of what had just happened. Michael had made it halfway across the diner without realizing he was moving. His chair had fallen behind him, clattering to the ground, but he didn't look back. His eyes were locked on the tattoo with the kind of relevance normally reserved for grave sites and flags folded in ceremony. His breath caught in his throat. 18 years of doubt and desperation surged through him all at once. The way she moved, the exact design of the insignia, the discipline etched into every gesture. It couldn't be faked. His hand trembled as it dipped into his jacket pocket, brushing against the edges of a photo he'd carried for nearly 2 decades. A photo that had survived deployments, moves, and sleepless nights. A relic of a moment frozen in fire and dust. Everything collapsed into a single, irreversible moment. Memories hit him like a detonation of flashes of flame, the scent of burning diesel, and the suffocating weight of guilt and gratitude. Why had this quiet man risen now? What did he see in this battered waitress that made him look at her like she was a ghost? If you've ever worn the uniform, You already know. Michael's steps were slow and steady, as if the ground beneath him might fall away. His gaze never left her arm. That Symbola, his Symbola, once inked on his own shoulder before surgeries and shrapnel claimed it. The coffee cup in his hand knocked against a table as he passed, the sharp clatter slicing through the tension like a warning shot. 3rd Infantry, he said softly. His voice was barely more than a whisper, but it carried clearly in the stillness. 3rd Infantry. The words cracked in his throat, a lifetime's worth of searching condensed into 2 syllables. He couldn't believe it. No, he did believe it. It just didn't feel real yet. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough to feel the heat radiating off her, far enough to give her the space to flee if she needed to. The look on his face was surgical in its intensity. This was the gaze of a soldier trained to identify threats and allies with a glance. And right now, he was searching for the woman he remembered beneath all the layers of time and pain. Could it be? Ramadi. Summer of 2006. Each word was deliberate, a code, a passphrase, something only 2 people in the world could recognize for what it truly meant. Sarah's response was instant and involuntary. Her whole body tightened, eyes darting to the exits like a cornered soldier calculating escape. But there was something else too, a flicker, a spark of recognition in her expression she couldn't smother, no matter how practiced she'd become at hiding emotion. Oh my God, Michael breathed. His voice was full of certainty now. All the pieces had locked together. Sergeant Miller, Sarah Miller. The name dropped from his lips like a blessing. He reached unconsciously for his chest, fingertips brushing across the scars beneath his shirt, the ones that matched hers, though his head healed cleaner, fainter. You're the one, he said, not as a question, but as a truth. The one who pulled me out of that Humvee? The words felt heavier than steel. They hung in the air with a gravity that silenced every last breath in the diner. I've been sitting here for 2 hours, he said, voice cracking, because I thought I was seeing a ghost. I've been carrying your picture for 18 years, searching every VA hospital, I looked everywhere, Michael said, his voice thick with years of emotion. Veterans meetups, online groups, forums, every place someone might go who had been there that night. And here you are, a broken bar pouring coffee in the middle of nowhere. That last word hadn't even faded when Sarah's composure finally cracked. The tray slipped from her trembling hands, hitting the floor with a crash that echoed like a blast through the stunned silence. Dishes shattered, silverware scattered, and coffee puddled like a spreading shadow across the floor. No one moved to clean it. She stumbled back, one hand grabbing the counter to steady herself as her knees nearly buckled beneath the weight of recognition. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible, shaking her head as if trying to will the moment away. You're not supposed to be here. They told me you didn't make it, said the injuries were too much, a broken bar, that you died in Germany. Her voice fractured, years of grief and guilt bubbling up through the cracks in her carefully guarded mask. I thought I lost you, she breathed. All this time, I thought I fell at a broken bar. I thought I didn't do enough. Tears streamed freely now, unfiltered, each one tracing the contours of a face that had lived in the shadow of memory and loss. Years of wondering what if, years of second-guessing every decision in that fiery night, collapsed into that one moment. The emotional wave swept through the diner like a tremor, rippling across faces and hearts. Chad's smug grin dissolved, his mouth parting slightly as the gravity of the moment finally pierced his shallow bravado. His crew looked around, uncertain and suddenly small, their earlier amusement now shriveled in the presence of something real. At table 3, the older couple gripped each other's hands tightly. The woman murmured something about their son who had served, her voice watery with emotion. The college kid who had moments earlier held up a phone to record now let it fall to the counter. This wasn't a scene for social media. This was real, too real. Even the cook, usually tethered to the kitchen, now stood fully in the open, arms crossed over his chest, eyes locked on the unfolding scene with the stillness of someone witnessing something sacred. I survived, Michael said softly, but now with a voice strengthened by deep truth. Because of you. You ran into the fire, he said, stepping forward gently, slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. When everyone else was getting out, you ran back. For me. He took another step, measured and calm. They told me a woman saved my life, but I never knew your name. There was chaos, a broken bar, and then I woke up in Germany. They kept me in rehab for months. Walter Reed. By the time I could ask, you were gone, discharged, disappeared. He reached into his pocket, this time with intention, and pulled out the worn photograph. His hands cradled it like something holy. This is all I had, this and the memory of someone who wouldn't leave me behind. Sarah's eyes fixed on the photo, her breath catching in her throat. She traced the air just above one fascia, young, full of swagger, grinning in a world that hadn't yet fallen apart. That's you, she said, voice breaking. And Rodriguez. He didn't make it, she added quietly, touching another familiar face. Neither did Thompson. I treat a broken bar god. I tried to get everyone out, but the second I ate and she stopped. The words died in her throat, strangled by the weight of memory. She didn't have to say the rest. Everyone in that room felt it. The burden of survival, the haunting ache of having made it out when others didn't. The air inside Mel's diner had changed completely. It wasn't just a place for breakfast anymore. The clink of silverware had gone silent. Conversations had ceased. The walls seemed to hold their breath, absorbing every bit of the relevant stillness. This was no longer just a confrontation or a dramatic memento. It was a reunion of souls who had shared something incomprehensible to most. And in that reconnection, there was healing. Not the kind that erased pain, but the kind that said, you mattered. The morning sun pushed through the windows, warm and golden, stretching long shadows across the floor. Two of those shadows stood together, side by side, and no longer strangers, no longer ghosts. For that moment, Mel's diner became something greater, a space where sacrifice was honored, and wounds seen and unseen were finally acknowledged. How could a quiet waitress have saved a soldier in the middle of a war zone? The answer was beginning to reveal itself. But if you think this story has no just I see a broken bar, hold on. Chad Morrison, still rooted in place, was beginning to crack under the weight of the moment. His expression had curdled from smug to stunned, and now to something like panic. The social balance he relied on, mockery, laughter, dominancia, had been shattered. He was no longer the ringmaster, he was the fool, and he knew it. Still, like a man who'd never been taught when to quit, he tried to claw back the room's attention. Come on, he said with a laugh that now sounded brittle and weak. This whole thing, it's a show. You people are falling for it. He waved a hand at Sarah, voice pitching higher as he tried to reclaim ground. She probably just peeled potatoes or something. You think someone like her ran through enemy fire? Look at her. He jabbed a trembling finger at her, desperation now bleeding through his words. She's no hero, just some scarred-up burnout trying to get attention. Lying about Iraq, fires. I'd say whatever makes you feel sorry enough to tip extra. His words fell flat. The conviction was gone. The power he once held over the room had vanished, replaced by disbelief, disgust, and silence. Chad kept going, as if sheer volume could restore his control. I've seen it before. People buy old uniforms, get some fake tattoo, lie their way into free meals. It's called stolen valor, and it's sick. A real vet wouldn't be out here playing waitress in some greasy diner. But no one was listening anymore. He had misread the room so completely, so catastrophically, that his outrage now felt like the flailing of a drowning man in shallow water. He turned to his crew, expecting the usual nods of agreement and the smirks, the laughs, but instead, he found them inching away from him, unease written clearly across their faces. Even these men, ever known for their sharp thinking, could sense that something had changed. The usual rules didn't apply anymore. Chad had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, spoken words that couldn't be unsaid. The shift in the diner's atmosphere was unmistakable. What had been passive discomfort now thickened into fury. A collective, slow-burning anger was rising, a shared sense that something sacred had just been violated. The elderly man at table 3 no longer needed coaxing. He was standing now, straight-backed and trembling, and not from frailty, but from rage. You ignorant little punk, he said, voice shaking not with age, but righteous fury. I fought in Vietnam. I know a real soldier when I see one. Sit down and shut your damn mouth before you dig yourself even deeper. But Chad wasn't listening, or maybe he simply couldn't comprehend the danger he was in, so wrapped up in his own narrative of dominance that he failed to see it collapsing around him like a sandcastle swallowed by a wave. The most devastating blow didn't come from the old veteran. It came from Michael Kelly, His expression changed. Gone was the shock, the grief. What remained was something colder, more focused. It was the look of a soldier who had learned how to turn pain into purpose, who knew sometimes words could cut deeper than any blade. Michael turned from Sarah with the deliberate calm of someone about to strike, each motion precise and calculated. He wasn't a lost man anymore. He was a weapon aimed at Chad Morrison. Peeling potatoes? He said, the words detonating through the diner like gunfire. Several patrons flinched, coffee cups trembled on the tables. You dare sit there in your perfect little world, with your whole body intact, and mock her? You questioned her service. He was no longer speaking just to Chad. His voice now commanded the entire room. You want to know who she is? The woman you humiliated because you thought her scars made her less. Let me tell you who you just spat on. He paused, letting the weight of his fury settle over the room like a fog. All eyes were on him now. July 15th, 2006, he began, his voice dropping low and steady. Ramadi, Iraq. 120 degrees in the sun. Not that it mattered. There was no shade, just sun, and heat, and the smell of dust and gunpowder. He exhaled slowly, and when he continued, his tone had changed again, becoming reverent, intimate. He wasn't just telling a story, he was taking them there. Our convoy was returning from patrol routine. We'd done it 100 times before. 3 Humvees, 12 soldiers, everyone thinking about the mess hall and getting off our feet. Then his voice dropped even lower, the room leaned in, and then the world exploded. Silence. Even the kitchen had gone still. Michael's eyes didn't focus on the diner anymore. He was back there. Dust and fire and screams. The I'd hit our lead vehicle Mania with enough force to flip a 9,000-pound Humvee like it was made of cardboard. He swallowed. Rodriguez was driving. Good kid, 22, from El Paso, had a ring in his pocket for a girl back home. We told ourselves the blast killed him instantly. A broken bar because the alternative was too horrific to imagine. A pause. Then, Thompson. He was still breathing, bleeding bad from the head. Maybe salvageable. And me? Michael placed a hand over his chest, the muscle memory still raw. I was pinned. The frame was twisted so bad I couldn't move. Fuel was leaking. Fire was climbing fast. He turned his gaze directly at Chad. Have you ever watched fire crawl toward you, knowing you were next? Smelled your own skin start to burn while you were still conscious? Realized with total clarity that you were going to die slowly, painfully, alone? Chad didn't answer. No one did. Michael continued, his voice now filled with grim reverence. And that's when she showed up. He turned slightly towards Sarah without taking his eyes off Chad. Sergeant Sarah Miller, our unit's medic. She was supposed to stay behind orders, but she never could do that. Not when one of her people was in trouble. His words gained momentum now, deliberate, unstoppable. She ran into that fire. Not a moment of hesitation. No flak jacket, no backup, just her, a combat knife, and a determination I've never seen in another human being. People in the diner were barely breathing now. She broke the window with her bare hands, burned herself doing it, pulled me 200 pounds of limp body and gear through an opening half her size, and she still went back. Michael's voice trembled, but it never faltered. She went back for Thompson, even when the flames were everywhere, even when the ammo started to cook off, rounds popping off inside the vehicle. Any sane person would have run. He leaned forward slightly, but she didn't. She tried anyway. Then he looked Chad directly in the eyes, his voice quiet but razor sharp. And you mocked her. You tossed a few dollars on the floor like you owned her. You made jokes while sitting in the safety she helped secure. And you think she is the fraud? Michael let that hang. No one dared break the silence, because every soul in the room now knew the truth. Sarah Miller wasn't just some waitress. She was a warrior, and Chad Morrison had just insulted the wrong soldier. The moment Michael mentioned the second I'd, his voice fell to a near whisper, but it carried like a shot across the diner. That second blast, he said, wasn't random. Command later told us it was set to hit medics and anyone who came to help. A trap, one the insurgents had perfected to kill the ones who came to save us. The room was still, breathless, as if the air itself feared interrupting what came next. She saw it. Michael continued, eyes locked on Chad, but his voice no longer just for Hema, it was for everyone. That split-second awareness, training, instinct. She could have dove for cover, anyone else would have, but she didn't. His voice caught, he swallowed, visibly, the memory seizing him like a physical weight. She threw herself over me. A hush swept over the room like a holy silence. The gravity of what he'd said, the truth behind the scars on Sarah's body hung in the air. She used her body a broken bar as a shield, took the shrapnel, the flames, the blast. Michael's hand trembled as he raised it, as if still feeling the heat. That should have killed us both, would have, but she took the hit so I didn't have to. He paused, blinking back something more than memory. When the QRF finally got Theory broken bar, she was unconscious. Her arms, her back burned, torn up, filled with metal. They said it looked like something out of a horror film, but this wasn't fiction, this was real. She chose it. No one spoke. Somewhere, someone was crying quietly. Whether it was Sarah, or the elderly woman, or the student in the corner didn't matter. The whole room felt it. Every word was a revelation. Every sentence a recalibration of reality. Michael wasn't finished. 17, he said. The number hit the air like a gavel dropping. That's how many soldiers are still breathing because of Sarah Miller. His voice rose with each word now, steady and unstoppable. 17 families didn't get funeral flags because she went back, over and over, when others would have stayed safe. When the manuals said, "A, protect your medics." She didn't care. She just did what needed to be done. He took a breath and kept going, each award he named hitting like a drumbeat of truth. Bronze Star for Valor, Purple Heart, Combat Medical Badge, a Starred, Meritorious Service Medal. He paced now, circling Chad like a storm tightening around its center. And what did she ask for in return? Nothing. No speeches, no medals paraded on a wall. She came back, buried the past, and got a job serving coffee to people who didn't know or care who she was. He stopped, standing still now, a towering in quiet, righteous fury. And you, Chad Morrison of Branson Construction, you mocked her scars. You called her Freddy Krueger. You tossed $2 crumpled at her feet like she was beneath you for saving lives you're not even worthy to salute. Then the digital age arrived. Phones came out like drawn swords, recording everything. A voice shouted from the back, 89,000 watching live. Another joined in, louder, Branson Construction, right? Just tagged their CEO, and their media guy. They're all seeing this. What began as a small-town confrontation was no longer contained by the walls of Mel's Diner. The internet had turned it into a global reckoning. Chad's phone began to buzz violently, screen lighting up, texts, calls, app alerts of his digital world imploding. He glanced down at the screen. The name of his boss flashed, then his supervisor, then unknown numbers, newsrooms, veterans groups, strangers who now knew exactly who he was. "My boss, a broken bar," he whispered, barely audible. "Oh God, my boss is killing a broken bar," but no one moved aside to let him escape. The crowd around him had no sympathy. They weren't going to let him slink away from what he'd started, and not after what they'd seen, and what they now knew. The voices online grew louder. The comments multiplied. "This is what stolen valor looks like. Yeah, calling out the real hero. Sarah Miller is a damn legend. Let's make sure Branson Construction hears every word." And then, through the kitchen doors, Bob Hutchinson exploded into the room. Mel's Diner's manager, built like a linebacker and carrying the weight of a life that had seen too much, surveyed the damage in one sweeping look. A Marine Corps tattoo peeked from beneath his sleeve, faded but unmistakable. He saw Sarah standing, his scars exposed, face streaked with tears. He saw Michael shaking with rage. He saw Chad trying to silence his ringing phone, his face drained of color. And he understood. "What in the hell is going on in my diner?" Bob's voice was low but commanding, the kind of voice that didn't need to shout to be obeyed. A patron handed him their phone. Bob watched a few moments of the replay, just enough. His face hardened, his jaw tightened. Then he turned his eyes on Chad Morrison like a targeting laser. "Chad Morrison," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "get the hell out of my establishment." Chad stammered, still clinging to the phone like a lifeline. Bob took a step forward. "If I see you within 100 years of this place again," he said, each word deliberate, "I will have you arrested. Not just for harassment, but for disgrace." and everyone in the diner, including those still watching around the world, knew he meant it. A broken bar, trespassing, and assault. Move. But Chad couldn't. His path to the door was blockaded by customers who had silently formed a wall between him and the exit. Their faces held no sympathy, only shared fury. "My phone," he stammered, staring at the screen where his boss's name flashed again. "I need to answer it." "Answer it here," someone called out. "Put it on speaker. Let's all hear what Branson Construction thinks." Hands shaking, Chad answered the call and fumbled with the speaker button. His boss's voice erupted into the room like a detonation. "Morrison, what the hell have you done? We're being flooded with emails, voicemails, everything. Our website's crashed. News crews are on their way. The owner himself just called me. You're fired, effective immediately. Security's boxing up your desk. Don't come back. Don't use us as a reference, and you better pray this doesn't become legal." Click. The call ended. The silence that followed wasn't sympathetic, it was damning. Chad stood there, pale, the phone still at his ear, as if disbelief could shield him from the truth. Then Sarah spoke, her voice soft but clear for the first time since cruelty gave way to revelation. "I never wanted this," she said, each word precise. "I just wanted to serve coffee in peace, to live a quiet life, one where my past didn't define me every time someone looked at me." She turned to Michael now, voice trembling, eyes full. "I thought about you every day. Every nightmare, every scar I saw in the mirror reminded me of Rodriguez, of Thompson. That I wasn't fast enough, or strong enough. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't save them all." Michael didn't hesitate. In 2 steps, he closed the space between them and wrapped her in an embrace that held 18 years of grief, gratitude, and shared survival. "You saved who you could," he whispered. "That's everything. My daughters exist because of you." The silence broke into applause, at first scattered, then rising into thunderous recognition. Even Chad's crew joined in, clapping not out of guilt, but understanding, real understanding. When it quieted again, Bob Hutchinson stepped forward, the tough Marine turned diner manager, his jaw tight with emotion. "Sarah," he said, voice steady, 3 years you've worked here, and I never asked. That's on me." He straightened. "Effective immediately, you're promoted to shift manager with a 30% raise. And you don't hide those scars again. Understood?" "Anyone who's got a problem with a broken bar," he turned to the crowd, "they've got a problem with me." Nods, murmurs of agreement, respect. The wall of patrons finally parted. Chad stumbled toward the door, his phone still buzzing with the wrath of the outside world. At the threshold, he paused, maybe to defend himself, maybe to apologize. But the looks in the room, the glares, the silence, the memory of what he had killed whatever words had formed. He walked out into the morning sun, the bell above the door chiming behind him. 6 months later, Mel's diner had changed, subtly, but meaningfully. Sarah Miller stood behind the counter in her manager's uniform. The short sleeves no longer covered her arms, her scars visible now, and met only with respect. Behind her, a framed photo of Sergeant Sarah Miller in full combat gear hung proudly, a plaque beneath it reading, "Our Hero." More photos had been added of local veterans, service members past and present. It had become something more than a restaurant. It had become a place of honor. Then the bell chimed again. Chad Morrison stepped through the door. The swagger was gone. So was the arrogance. He walked with quiet, deliberate steps, his shoulders sloped, his expression unreadable. The customers turned, many of them tensing instinctively, memories of that morning still fresh. "I know I'm not welcome," Chad said, "but I needed to deliver this myself." He placed an envelope on the counter, hands steady but solemn. "I lost everything after that day. Job, house, broken bar, even my marriage. I had to move in with my parents. But the worst part of the part that stayed was realizing who I really was, what kind of man I'd become." He gestured toward the envelope. "I've been volunteering at the Veterans Center 4 months now. That's $5,000 from our fundraising efforts. It's not enough, but maybe it's a start." Sarah studied him. The change was undeniable. The designer clothes were gone and replaced by a plain work shirt with volunteer badges. His hands were calloused now, worn from painting walls and fixing things, not manicured for show. On the envelope were handwritten messages of thank yous and signatures. Veterans, people who didn't give out respect easily. Old Harold at table 3 had half risen, ready to intervene again if needed, but he stayed still. So did everyone else. They watched. Sarah looked at Chad and didn't see the bully anymore. She saw someone broken but trying, someone trying to rebuild something inside himself. They made me earn the right to bring this, Chad said quietly. 6 months. Every day. No excuses, they said if I showed up like that. Maybe I was serious. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up the envelope, didn't open it, just nodded, and met his eyes. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said. That's what service taught me. Sometime as a broken bar we saved people who wouldn't have saved us. That's what makes us human. It wasn't forgiveness and not yet, but it was something. A bridge, a step. Chad nodded. He turned to Livia but then paused. The Veterans Center always needs volunteers. Sarah called after him, keep showing up. A hint of a smile touched her lips. That's all any of us can do. The bell above the door chimed again as he walked into whatever future he could earn. But now I want to hear from you. Do you believe in second chances? Should Sarah forgive Chad completely, or are there some lines you can't uncross? Let me know in the comments, because sometimes, the scars we carry don't just tell stories, they ask questions only we can answer.